All right, what's up, everybody? This is A7X Fan Ben. Welcome to Pirates CSG podcast number 57. And I'm super happy to welcome some other podcasters in the Pirates world. Welcome aboard RedDragon and Captain Ron. How are you guys doing?
Great,
Very
great
good,
to be
buddy.
here.
Yep,
Great to be here too.
love it, love it. Yeah, it's so cool to hear your voices after hearing the old Blog Talk radio episodes from like 2009. It's really awesome to
Yeah,
be able to
Yeah,
talk to you after all these years. So,
I know. 14 years, it's such a long time,
I
And
know.
the game's still around, which is
yep,
good. I mean, it's not mainstream or it's not sold, but I see there's so many fan of the game, which is great.
yeah, yeah. We're
Yeah.
trying to keep it alive the best we can. So, all right. So I want to thank the community. We actually had three different folks chime in on some questions. So we'll get into those eventually. And the first thing I want to start with, though, is what got you guys into Pirate CSG and when did it all kick off for you?
I guess I'll start. Well, I start with the card game, Spanish Main. I always like ships. Being a Navy guy myself, seeing those paper ships, card ships out on, I think I saw it on Toys R Us. It was when Toys R Us was around. And I just started buying cards and really fell in love with the characters in it. And just a simple way of playing the game on the tabletop. And and the rules were simple, but it was fun. It had some fun in it. And then when they started adding events, and which some people don't like, events, special treasures, it made the game much interesting too, which I like and stuff. So that's how I got in. I think it was what was it, 2004, 2005? You could correct me if I'm wrong. When the cards first started coming out,
Yeah,
and yeah, and then the collector in me just started just collecting everything that was Pirates of the Spanish Main, the Coast, Spanish Revolution. I think came up, and I think after that was the Barbary Coast,
yep,
and I
yep.
kept going from there.
Nice.
Yeah, I started playing. I lived in down in Hollywood, and I had an apartment down there at the time. And across the hall from me, there was a guy who he was the building manager. And I during the spring of because the online game started, believe it came out in like December of 2006. And so anyway, this guy had like it was sometime in the spring of 2007. I think maybe Easter weekend. He had a barbecue, and he had the game at the barbecue, and so a bunch of us played. And I was like, "Oh, this game is amazing! I love it!" You know, the tabletop game, and which is what we called it then. I don't know if you guys, obviously, you guys probably don't even make a distinction, but we used to call the online game, and the table and the board game or whatever tabletop or TT. That's how we referred to it.
Yep.
But he had the game, and I played it, and I was like, "Oh, this is great!" And he told me about the cards and how to get them. But then he said, "But there's actually an online game that they just brought out, just a few months ago." And so that night I signed up for it, and I joined his guild. And his name in the game was Ichthultu. So if Icky is out there listening, he was one of the big, great casual, more of a casual player. He didn't really play tournaments as much, but he was a big, supporter of the game. And he gave me a bunch of his extra cards, and a bunch of people gave me like extras. People were like more than happy to give you their extra cards, and so then I spent, I don't know, probably, I don't even know how much. It was expensive. That was part of the problem. I think is it's so expensive. I know if you play the game now, it probably is even more expensive because you're trying to get packs and stuff that no longer being made. But at the time, the online packs for cards were the exact same price as the regular, the physical cards. So anyway, that's really how I got into it. I started playing that night, and I got hooked, and I couldn't wait to buy more cards. I spent probably a couple $100 in that first couple weeks, just buying card after card. So, and then I think there were some people online. There was one guy named the Sword Lord who he had an account on eBay, and he would sell virtual cards there. So you buy them from him on eBay, and then you would go into the game, and he'd give you the card that you bought. So that's how I started, and I built up my crew from there. So yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Love it. Yeah, it's good to hear you both started with a tabletop game too, and then bridged that gap pretty quickly. So makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump around to some of the questions from the community. I think some of the ones I had to ask were probably best for later in the podcast. So the next ones come from Jeremiah, username the Nine of Spades. And he says, tell us about the differences between playing digitally versus the physical game.
Well, Ron,
Oh,
Ron, Ron
okay.
could probably answer this better than I could, because he played the tabletop game
Well, when
way
I
more than we did.
first started playing, I had I had the card game, and I played with my younger kids at the time. Now they're all in college and high school, but at the time they were really young, and um, like I never knew all these combinations to make. We're matching up the I think it was called Blackheart and Gurney Gallo, and getting like four moves out of the games, the ships. Of course, house rules now we usually only make two moves per ship. But yeah, at the beginning I was just a casual fan. I would put a one same action crew and a captain, and probably not even a helmsman at the time. I would just put an explorer and play like that. Get the treasures, go back, and pretty much that's how it was at the beginning with my card game. Until once the online game started, you had so many people with combinations. I never was a hardcore gamer or card player, so probably that's why at the beginning I didn't have it like that. But then once when I went to the online game, I started seeing all these combos. I mean, there was a HMS Titan at the time that was at the time of the online game. You had, I think the game started with not Ocean Edge, but the other, I think Davy Jones' Curse. That was the first card set that came out online because of Pirates of the Caribbean and its popularity. I think the game and the online game took off because of that. Everybody liked the pirate stuff.
I think it was
So that
Spanish Main was the first one.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, on the card game, absolutely. But I believe the online game started out with Curse, Davy Coast, the Curse of Davy Jones, and then it went to the Pirates of Spanish Main.
Hmm.
Because going in, the toughest ship at the time was the Executor, and then once the Spanish Main got in, then the toughest ship was the HMS Titan,
Yeah.
which somehow they put in Blackheart. They put in Gurney Gallo in there. They also had Brother Virgil, Dune, Mrs. Dune, I think it was. They had about 12 characters in one ship on the HMS Titan, and
It was
they would
per
get that
turn.
HMS Titan to go four times. And I
Yeah.
was like, "What the heck is this?"
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely
Yeah. It was.
So
tamped down on that.
yeah, yeah. So pretty much on the online game was much more tougher because the game allowed you to do all that stuff, which it actually in the rules of the game it does do that too. But there were some things like the canceller crew on the online game did not work well, which would have fixed a lot of the problems on the online game, where that would your ship would run into the one of the Spanish ships, the Corazado or anything like that. And if you had that canceller crew at the time, it would have mitigated a lot of the big heavy ships that would destroy everything, the whole board at one time sometimes. So I
Yeah.
think that was the difference in the online game was some of the rules they were not able to put it on the online game as is on a tabletop, which is with individuals and you're playing with your friend, you can actually administer those rules better.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I remember hearing about that canceller thing on the old online show. Where's
Yeah.
the board, like essentially the ocean on the online game, was there, I assume there was some kind of limit to it. Like the average board size for a Pirates game or table size, it's recommended like 3 feet by 3 feet. I don't know if that was a
Well.
modular thing in the online game where you could pick the
Yeah.
size of the ocean.
that was one of the problems with the online game is the ocean went on and on. I mean, there was a limit, but it was way out there. So
Oh,
the canceller was a problem because it didn't work correctly. Like if you're bringing a ship over to another ship and they have a canceller there, the game should have like paused there so that that person could use that canceling card,
yeah.
That's right.
and it didn't. And so that those canceller cards were kind of useful, but not as useful as they should have been. And that would have I think that specifically was one of the biggest things why a lot of people who were big players of the tabletop game didn't stick around long in the online game, because that really disrupted things. But the size of the map was part of the problem. But the biggest problem they had was Sony had the hardest time with getting the distances between the islands correct and getting the island sizes correct.
Hmm.
When the game, for the first, like, I don't know, 8 months of the game, I think they had the distances okay, but the island sizes were tiny. Most ships were bigger than the islands. They were ridiculous. And so it really made things into a kind of a power gamer with just all gunners. In fact, my first tournament I went into, uh, the first tournament I did, I went up against a guy named Admiral Spirit, who he figured out this way of making the Titan, the HMS Titan, into 4 turns.
Yeah.
And there was no limit, so it would go 4 turns. And the first thing he does is he goes across the entire map, and it was a deathmatch game, goes across the entire map and wipes me out in like one turn, in the first turn, with his 4-turn Titan. I think I had like one little ship left. And then the second game I played, I've got like a balanced fleet. I think at the time I might have been using the Revenant and a couple little gold running ships, and the other guy has just two ships. They're both like gunners. One is the Bonaparte and the other was the Titan, and he
Oh.
didn't even try to get gold. He just came across the map and wiped out my ships. So those
Yeah.
distances really made a big difference. In addition to the fact, the other big thing was that the French ship, the Bonaparte, you couldn't fire at it from inside S
Yep.
range, and
Yeah.
the online game had such a hard time determining that S range.
Oof.
You would be in L range completely with all of your guns, and it wouldn't let you. It would a fire button, and that became a real problem, because then whoever had the Bonaparte could just pin you, and there's nothing you could do. There was no way to your other ship couldn't fire on it. It was so hard to get that right. Once in a while you get lucky, but it was just pure luck. It was really hard to determine that.
Yeah, that would probably be my least favorite thing about the online game, because that Bonaparte ship is already my least favorite in the game in general, and that just makes it way, way worse. Especially because
Yeah.
the WizKids banned the reverse pinning thing, where you can pivot on the stern with the schooner keyword, and like slam into another ship's bow to pin it. That's not legal in the
Yeah.
tabletop either. So that's another weird glitch that makes that ship way,
Yeah.
way, way worse. So yeah,
Well,
that's a
and
nightmare.
that was the other thing, is that WizKids really didn't, or not WizKids, but Sony didn't really, um, they didn't support it very well. So those kinds of things that needed to be fixed or adjusted, they just didn't happen.
Yikes. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually, they so once you had the Bonaparte there, but like I said, eventually you had events in there where you could put the air, I think it was called foul wind, and you could actually push the Bonaparte out.
Yeah.
So there was a evolution of the tactics after that. But of course, you had to use a lot of points to do that, while the guy just had the Bonaparte and he would do it. But you had that. You could use the counselor, but of course the Bonaparte would hit you first. You have to let it to hit you first, and then once it's close enough, you could cancel that ability, and then you're able to shoot the ship. But also they would pin you in such a way you couldn't shoot it, only
Yeah.
with one cannon.
Yeah, with the angles.
You
Yep.
know.
Yeah, that's rough.
So in a way, it was bad, but also it was very interesting and cool to find out ways to defeat some of these fleets.
Mhm.
I was never really the DM. That was Dragon's game, playing DM at the time. I always play uh, the average standard game where you get gold, and whoever made it to 15 would win. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
where I did it. But yeah, the game was like I said, the online game has so many problems. But if you forgot about the tabletop game that you were a fan of and
Mhm.
just play it as just an online game, it's a game, the same game but different rules. Then you kind of said to yourself, all right, so this is what it is. Now let's see what we could do and build a
yeah,
fleet with it.
Yeah, you
So
kind of have to
that was it.
separate the two because if you try to bring your fleets from tabletop straight into SOE version, you might just get wiped out quickly. So,
yeah,
Oh yeah,
totally.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's a heavy on the online game, and I think competitively, it's a heavy pirate ship game, pirate crew game because they're cheaper, of course.
yeah,
The
Mhm.
ships are cheaper, and you're always trying to find the bigger bang for your buck.
yeah,
Which is the ship that's cheapest and much more consistent and getting you stuff, much that gives you the work of either destroying your opponent's fleet or grabbing the gold and coming back to your treasure home.
But
yeah,
Ron's right because a lot of players who played the physical game would come on, and it was a great way to test out fleets, because when you have the cards, sometimes it just gets a little overwhelming. You've got all the cards, you've got the pieces and everything, and then setting up a game, all of that, it's not that easy to play 10 games in a row in an afternoon. Whereas on
yeah,
the online game, you could go into the fleet builder, build a fleet just to see and test it out in a casual game for free, or maybe even take it into a tournament to see how it goes. But it would just, it was a great way to learn how to use a lot of cards that you might have just read, the flavor of it, or the ability of it. You might have just read that ability and thought, it's not that big of a deal. But you don't think about maybe how it could be used in conjunction with another card. So it was great in that way. It was really a quick way to test out whether or not a fleet was going to work.
yeah. That makes sense. That's really
Yeah.
cool. So that kind of
And
segs
yeah,
for,
and it
yeah,
was. Oh yeah, I just wanted to put in. It was still fun. If you had a couple of friends of yours that abide by some rules, yeah, you're able to just play with them. You're able to have a casual game and just play with them. And yeah, it's so fun to. Anytime you go in online and you're able to play with four players,
Hmm.
and build up the whole map. And I'm telling you, have about 2-3 hours worth of just one game, which is
mhm,
pretty cool.
yeah, nice. Yeah, that segs right into the next question. What were the most common fleet strategies used on the digital platform, and were there any strategies considered the best or most effective?
Uh,
Uh,
I would say that it really depended because there were so many formats available to you that you could set up a game in, that it just kind of, depended on the format, because there were standard games that would go as low as 15 points all the way up to 120 points, I think was the biggest one. And
yes, I
so,
think so.
yeah, but so it really just depended. But I can tell you the ships that you wound up seeing the most were uh the Harbinger and the HMS Temple. Those in conjunction, especially if it's a standard game, those in conjunction with, and Ron can tell you more about that. But in terms of deathmatch, the ones that I use the most would be the Harbinger, uh, the both Deliverances, the one from Crimson Coast and the other, and the what was it?
Ocean.
Ocean's Edge.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then HMS Temple. I usually had five. I don't really remember what the fifth one would be, but or maybe I only had four. 100. It just depends on I guess, on the point total. So it was because there was 100-point deathmatch, and that was probably the most common deathmatch game. There was
yeah,
also 60-point, but those were, probably the most common fleets.
yeah.
But I I used the one that I was known most for was probably my dragon fleet. I would use Angelica, and
Yep. I remember.
and Angelica, I would use that in conjunction along with Bonnie. What is it? The French ship Le Bon Chance, I think, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And then I used that re-roll guy, Griffin Owen, something Griffin Owen.
yeah.
And so what I'd do is I'd kind of I would, if I got that um, extra action from him, then I would cast out Angelica and have her fire on a ship, and then you could just bring her back. And so it was like you just send her out to a ship, and then you just bring her back in the same turn. So I'd only send her out when that. But I use that a lot in the higher point total games, I guess.
Yeah,
So
interesting. Did they have the captain ability built into Sea Dragon then, where you can like move
yeah,
and shoot with the same move action? Oh, okay, that's
yeah,
wild.
I think
Okay.
so. Right, Ron?
Yeah. On the Sea Dragon, you could only do the double move was if you had like Griffin. You had one of those where you roll if you get a
Yeah,
6.
Yeah,
Any ship on your fleet could move an extra. And I think that's when that was the combination. So they would put that crew in a really small ship that was 3 point, whatever it
right.
was,
yep,
five
Yeah.
points, and they would
Well,
put that all the way in the back,
yeah.
and they would have their warships in the front, but away from about 3 moves, right from you, and then they would have a dragon there. Some people would use a dragon. Some people would use, I think it was Le Superbe because they would use Capitan Aratio, who was also a SAC captain. So you would have that SAP captain, and you would have Kaliko Cat. You would have the
Mhm.
other same action move captain on that fleet. So you'll have, and this is mostly on DMs, on death
Right.
matches.
Yeah.
So you would have 3 SAC captains, which is a Ratio, I think it was Blackheart, and Havana Black, I
yep,
think it was, on that.
Yeah.
And then they would have the combination of the friendship, really fast friendship. You would have, I think, the Titan, the Harbinger, and like Dragon said, he would have his dragon, and that would be an X factor because a lot of people didn't use the dragon, but once that dragon, one of your ship caught fire, then you had to turn it off, and that was really hard to do too.
Well, and
yep,
So
also
there was a lot of combos.
it it deleted a cargo, so you could like kill one of their guys or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
And also the Zeus
yes,
was tournament legal, so I used that quite a bit until for a while anyway, until people started figuring out better ways to combat that one. But I did use the Zeus, which people had kind of not used as much for a while because it was such a high point total and
yeah,
so much crew on one ship. But once what was the American Revolution? Once Revolution came out, and then they had natives.
yeah.
It be,
Natives. They had
ooh,
mermaids, I think it was.
yeah,
yeah,
Uh,
mermaids. Yeah, those made it kind of harder to use those big 10 masters, but I did
yeah,
use the Zeus,
yeah.
which was funny because Baoshuan was not tournament legal in that game,
Huh.
but they let
yeah.
Zeus be legal. I don't know why.
That is bizarre because Zeus is generally a more competitive ship. That's really
Oh
weird to
yeah,
me. Huh.
it's much faster and just it's pirate. So
Yeah, it's cheaper, so it's a lot easier to fit other stuff in around it in the fleet. Huh. Yeah,
right,
that's weird.
yeah.
Yeah, nowadays with the dragon combo, you have to use we don't have to, but we don't have captain abilities not built into the Sea Dragon. So usually we do it with
Uh,
Lord
yeah.
Micron
No.
from Fire and Steel. I don't know if Fire and Steel got in the online game, but he
No.
allows you to
No,
sacrifice.
it did not.
Okay. Yeah, he allows you
But
to
Lord
basically give
Micron,
up the ship's
yes.
action that he's on and give it to a different ship in your fleet. So the advantage
Yeah.
there is you don't have to roll the 6. It's just
Right.
automatic. So you can do it
Yeah.
with the dragon every turn. But it's hard to
Yeah.
Yes,
you
yes.
can't give 3 actions, so you can only move and then shoot. So you can't
Mm,
bring it back on the same turn, but still pretty effective sometimes. So
yeah.
nice. Yeah, I was going to ask
That
you about
Lord
that
Micron. And I
Zeus
think the
fleet.
American, there was an American crew that also got that ability, was it? And or was it the French crew?
Yeah, the French
No,
got one.
Micron is French. Oh, French got one, yeah, but he had also the added captain ability or something, right?
Yeah,
Something
Delafloat
like
is the
that.
French version of Micron with the captain ability for 9 points. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's good to hear about that Zeus fleet.
I
I remember hearing about that on the online show from back in '09. Sounded like you played it a
Yeah,
lot and it was pretty amazing for a while.
yeah.
it was pretty fun. And then when they changed they when they changed the island spacing at the very towards the I don't know after it was towards the end of the game they changed the island spacing so it was really short
Hmm.
and the Zeus would get would get over to an island really quick just because it was so long.
Huh.
Yeah.
Man, that
You
is
get over to an
yeah,
island and just load it up.
that is bizarre.
Yeah.
Because the way
Yeah.
WizKids had it when the game first came out, like Spanish Main, the island distance was 2L to 4L for
Yeah.
distances between islands, but then they increased it to 3L to 6L. So that's weird that in the online it went backwards and went closer. That's really kind of
Yeah.
fascinating. I don't know what drove that
Yeah.
decision, but
They screwed up. I think they at the beginning they screwed up with the island sizing, and that was the real problem. And everybody was screaming for them to reduce the space between the islands, but it wasn't the space; it was the size of the islands.
okay.
So they wound up doing both. They made the islands bigger and made the space a little smaller. So I think they might have gone back to 2-4.
Okay.
And so it
Yeah.
was. I mean, people who had devised like Red Fang, that player Red Fang and Tupamaro, they devised fleets that would win the game in one turn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with Jade and I think they used the Neptune's Horde and Blackheart, and they used what Jade as UT, I think, or whatever,
Yeah.
and they could win in one turn.
Yeah. Yeah, you can eventually start to like gamify it and calculate like how many coins you can bring home and what they might
Right.
be worth based on what you put in and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Did you either of you
Yeah,
run?
like I said, they.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Oh no! Oh no! Go ahead! Go ahead! Go ahead! Go ahead,
Yeah.
buddy.
Did either of you run online tournaments at all?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, lots. They would always have like every Friday. I think when the game was at its peak, every Friday,
And
and
Saturday.
well, you could start. Yeah, every Friday they would have their own tournaments, right? But you could start if you had 16 players. I think it was, or even eight. I'm not sure, but I think it was
They
16 players. You were
yeah,
able to start a tournament.
they it was all weekend long. They had because they had a Friday night tournament and then a Saturday and a Sunday.
Nice.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And those were sponsored by Sony. So they would come up every month, they'd come up with their schedule. And towards the end, the last 6 months of the game, they kind of just stopped doing that. Or I mean, they would have their setup tournaments, but it was just the same one every month. But there for a while, they had some kind of creative ones, and so Friday nights were usually deathmatch, I think, and so it'd be a different one every week, and sometimes it would be, and then Saturday morning there'd be a sponsored tournament that would be uh, battle lines, or it could be like, well, the one that Ron was like impossible to beat in was 40 point Spanish main only.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
standard game.
That was Ron's like baby, and he was almost, I think, almost impossible to beat in that one. So,
Oh,
but yeah, but at any time you could set up your own tournament. There was a tournament room, and you go in there, and it's just, as long as you just had enough people, you could start a tournament. It could be whatever format you want.
nice.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah, you had the tournament, what we call it, a tournament master. It wasn't called that, but one guy would just say, okay, I'm going to put in for a tournament a 40-point standard game. And then you would sign up, you'll go up. And then in online, you were able to see that, and then you're able to join. And once it got, I think 16 or 8, I believe, I'm not too sure. And then the game would start.
Mhm.
Yeah. So they do have simultaneous play, obviously, like where everyone in the first round matched up would play at once in like different ocean maps
Yes.
and then move on from
Yeah.
there. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I guess
and if you lost, you were out, and then you'd move on, right?
yeah, and you could
Yeah.
Or no, you weren't out. You would no, actually, you keep playing. You would if you lost, you would still like you'd play another person who lost or something like that.
yeah, I see what you
Yeah.
mean. Okay, interesting. That's pretty cool actually, because then you can still
Yeah,
And
gain
then
experience and stuff.
the winner would get some prize. They would get either an unlimited card, something like that, and that's how
yeah,
it was.
yeah. You get a couple. I think the winner got. It depended if it was one of the Sony sponsored ones. Sometimes they'd have a special prize like a ship, but if it was one you did yourself, it would. I think you'd get if you won, you got 3 packs or something.
Yeah, very nice.
Yes, it was, and that would actually. I got to a point where the last year or so, I wasn't even wasting money because I was selling my cards that I was winning
Mhm.
to collectors,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it was great. That was a good point.
Yeah,
Good
that was
thing
the only
about it.
drawback to the tournaments, even the ones that you started yourself, was unless you did it. I mean, people started doing tournaments in the casual room. It was just informal. But the ones that you set up on their tournament page, those were those cost money. So it was I can't remember how much it was to
Yes,
join.
you're right.
It
Some
was like
kind of currency.
yeah, it was like $5 or whatever their currency was, which each coin was a dollar. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Was it free if you set up your own tournaments that weren't like
If you
sanctioned?
did it in the casual room, yeah, but no,
Yeah.
like if you did your own, it was still everybody had to fork over $5, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's. I just remember that, and that's why some people stopped playing too, because the big gamers would play that, and in a way it was free because we would sell those rare cards that we would get from those
Right.
tournaments, and we would have the game currency at the time. So I think it was for $10 you would get 10 coins, so it was $1 each, but it cost 5 coins to get into a tournament.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. At one point, I won like 20 tournaments in a row, and I
Oh,
don't think I had to pay for a tournament, ever after that because I had so many cards, but so
wow.
many packs to sell.
Yeah, that is insane. Holy crap.
Yeah.
How many, man, so that must be an insane winning streak for games too. Because if it was a
Yeah.
16 player tournament, that'd be like, what, like 4 wins or something like that times
Yeah, it
20.
was. I
Man.
mean, it was. Yeah, it was a pretty good run. But I mean, Ron and I both. I mean, Ron had long streaks too. We both were #1 players in the world for a while. Like we both topped the list at different times.
Yeah, nice. I love like the volume of play you can get into because, like you said, it's
Yeah.
sometimes usually when I play tabletop nowadays, it's a struggle to complete 2 games in
Right.
sometimes up
Yes.
to like 6 or 7 hours, let
Right.
alone 10 in a day, which I've only done when playing like small solo games back in the day.
Well,
So
it was a lot easier there because of the timer. I don't know. If there's no timer in the tabletop, then
oh
yeah, you could go longer. But the timer in the online game was you really had to be conscious of time. You couldn't just sit there and it couldn't you couldn't sit and think about your moves. You kind of had to
yeah,
already have an idea what you wanted to do and then do it as quickly as you could.
Yeah,
okay.
tournament games were like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
That makes a big difference because there's no timer in the official rules. So was it like a minute per turn or 2 minutes?
no, it
it,
was
it was
it
chess.
was a chess timer, and so
Yeah,
each player only had a certain amount of time, and if you ran out of time you automatically lost.
yeah,
So there were people who, fortunately, we had a pretty good community of people who didn't do this, but especially early in the game, the first year and a half of the game when there were lots of people playing, uh, there were certain people. If I saw them joining, I would not join the game because I knew that they would purposely put a fleet out there to waste time, or not waste your time. Basically, they would click end turn as quickly as they possibly could after you've gone, and you're already behind on time.
huh,
And
Yeah,
especially if it's a deathmatch game, like if it's a standard game, you could still win with gold or whatever. But those people would then put a bunch of bad UTs on and stuff to destroy gold or whatever,
yep.
and they would just send a bunch of really fast ships out into the farthest reaches of the map, which in this map was ginormous. It was too far. So that was another reason why I kept a dragon around too, in case one of those, because you could fly wherever you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a pretty it was a pretty bad exploit. A couple guys, or at least one guy from Ron's guild, was pretty bad about that.
Yeah.
Miss
Okay.
Brian, I think
Yep,
it was.
yep, Brian.
The Cheats girl. Remember the Cheats girl or
Oh
something
yeah,
like that?
yeah.
The Cheetah girl?
Cheetah Girl and her boy. She had a boyfriend. I can't remember his name now, and they were horrible. They would get nothing but just ships like you couldn't shoot within S, like Bonaparte, or submarines, and then just send them out in all different directions and try to time you out. That was all they wanted to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, that's rough. I could see how that would make you
Yeah.
not want to join a tournament. It reminds me of
Oh,
Yeah.
like card games like Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, like you run out of cards in the deck, that's it, you lose. So
yeah.
interesting. Were there, speaking of the tournaments, were there any like big rivalries that developed and then continued over the course of like months or years?
Oh yeah.
I've got some of the usernames up on the Hall of Fame site.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Dragon and myself, we were a bit of rivals, but we were really
Mhm.
good friends too.
Yeah.
We had a couple struggling because of my friend Brian, who I don't even know anymore, but he used to do a lot of bad things. He was a young kid. I used to protect him a lot, but he used to do a lot of really bad stuff during tournaments
Oh
that
yeah.
a lot of the guys
He
did
would
not like.
exploit every glitch in the game that he
Yeah.
possibly could.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a Captain Strack. I think he passed, rest in peace. But Captain
Yeah.
Strack, I had a rivalry with him
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
lot. Yeah.
Interesting.
Everyone
So it,
did.
it was good. Yeah, like I say, we had some really good people there who played. Like Dragon was great. Captain Strack was good. We had the Road Squadron Guild. All those guys were pretty cool. They were from Australia. Most of them was from Australia. Uh, we had, like I said, Captain Strack had, I forgot what the name of his guild was. I
He
had the Ironclad Guild, which was really dominated with myself and then a whole bunch of young kids and some casual fans. But it was good. There was a lot of rivalries and there was a lot of little fights online sometimes too. You know.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, there were a lot of, like, there was a forum on Sony's website for Pirates, and that would get out of hand with people arguing. There was this guy named DJ Westerdale who
Yeah.
was a really good. He was a really good. You know, he was a really good fan of the game and an ambassador of the game, but he would get really frustrated with people if he saw that they were playing with these, powerful fleets, and he would go on the forum and just raise a stink. And he was kind of friends with Wolf from WizKids, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's really interesting
Yes.
to hear about. I'm pretty sure he had a miniature trading account, which back when the online game was popular was one of the more popular like bulletin boards or forums for the Pirates
uh,
game, mostly
yeah,
tabletop. And I want to say I interacted with him a tiny bit on there before it went offline back in 2019. But yeah, I might ask Wolf about that because I still talk with him once in a while through email. So
yeah, he was a nice guy. He just got a little fiery sometimes, and he didn't like the big power fleets and tournament gamer fleets and stuff. And so I remember there was one time a new player came to me and said, "Hey, I want to play you in a match on the casual thing, on the casual room." And he said, "I want you to use your best tournament fleet against me so that I can learn the cards and see them in practice." And I was like, "Okay." So we did, and you could watch other people's games.
mhm.
So you could go into the
Yeah.
casual game and watch the game. You couldn't do that in tournaments, but you could do it in the casual rooms. And unless you set it to be private, then people couldn't, because sometimes if you were in a guild, you would play with a guild mate to test fleets, and you didn't want people seeing the fleet you were testing out. But
Yeah.
but if you left it open, then people could come in and watch. and DJ came in and watched that game, and he saw he saw that this kid was just using like common cards and mismatched stuff, and it didn't, you know. And then I had I had like Zeus and all this and a dragon and everything, and he like flipped out on me about that. I'm like, dude, the kid asked me to bring my best fleet so he could just see it in action and kind of copy it. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to copy my fleet. Um, and by that time I'd used it so many times I really didn't care. You know, everybody knew the fleet that I used.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was kind of funny, but that was the way he did things.
Yeah, interesting. I see on the blog spot it says Common Pool is a Pirates institution thanks to DJ. Was that Common Pool like using all commons or something in fleets?
No, it was an account that he created. Well, I hadn't thought about this forever, but it was an account he created that he would everybody would donate their double cards to that. And so when new
Oh,
players would come in, he would get into his common pot pool account and give them cards.
yeah,
So
nice.
yeah.
That's cool. Nice.
It was a good community in general. It was a good community, but it was small, and that's the only thing that was. It was
Yeah,
small.
especially the last year,
Yeah,
especially, it was really small. Before that, the first year and a half was good, but after see what happened. I'm sorry to cut you off, Ron.
no problem.
What happened was the game started out when I joined. There were 4 sets out. There was Cursed,
Davy Jones Curse?
Dave Jones Curse, Spanish Main, the Mysterious Islands, and I believe South China Seas had just come out, and
Something.
yeah, and so those, and that was very popular then. Like there would be like 100 people in the tourney rooms and setting up their own tourney. It was amazing, and then that summer of 2007 they didn't release another set until like September. They like took a break from releasing sets. So it kind of dipped a little bit in popularity there for a while. And then they released Crimson Coast, which was wildly popular,
Yep.
Yeah.
and Ocean's Edge, which was less popular, but at least it was a new set. And that was very popular again. And then they released in the spring of 2008, they released the American one, Revolution. I can never
Revolution.
think of the name of that for some reason, but
The revolution.
Revolution.
Pirates of the Revolution.
Yeah, and then people got word that that was it. They weren't going to be releasing anything else,
Hmm.
and so that first year and a half was great. And after that, people were like, "I'm not spending money on something that might close," you know, because when you buy your cards, you still have those cards after WizKids closed down.
Yep.
But on when you have virtual cards, we spent the exact same amount of money or more on those
Yeah.
cards. Some of them,
That's rough.
many times, those packs were the same price as the physical packs you could buy,
Yep.
and but yet I'm left with nothing. I spent hundreds of dollars on that game in the 2 years that 2 or 3 years that it was out,
Yeah.
and have nothing to show for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. So it was basically, so they released it December 06. So it's mainly 2007 through 2009 that it was running. I know the
Yeah,
Wikipedia at one point said it shut down in like early, I think it was January 2010 is what it reported. So
yeah. Might
interesting.
have. I think they kept the game up for a while to just let people play it, but by then it was just like the room. Everything was empty. You know, I think our last.
Yeah, maybe 4 or 5 people would show up, and they wouldn't even
Yeah,
talk.
right. Yeah, there'd be just people like you'd see an account sitting there, but it was dead. And I think our last podcast episode was like September of that or August of 2008, 9. I mean,
Yeah.
2009 maybe.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing
That
as well. August '09.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting. Do you know how the rating was like calculated? Because I'm seeing on the Hall of Fame site, I'm seeing like Filnius with a losing record, but then he still has, seems like a pretty good rating compared to Tupamaro, who has like crazy amount of tournament wins and things like that. So I'm just kind of curious, like maybe what the range was, or if you know how they calculated it.
I think if you beat, I'm not too sure, but I know if you played with a lot of high rated players, your rating will go up. So it also depend, and was only involved on any tournament you did where you paid money is where they based that, not on a casual game. But yeah, one time I was like the highest player, and then I played like 3 matches, and I ended up losing. Well, one time I picked the wrong fleet and I ended up going way down, like really fast. Eventually I caught
Mhm.
back up, but I think it had to do with the competition you played.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
I could be
the
wrong.
when you first started out, you had a white skull next to your name. And when you got to, I think, 1,000 points, if I'm not mistaken, I really don't remember now. But then you got a bronze
Yeah.
skull, and that was kind of your coming out, like, okay, I can play this game. And then that's what most people were. And then at a certain point, I think it was 1,800 points. I think you got a gold skull. So I got a gold skull.
Yeah.
I think Ron, you got one, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
there was about 5 of us, 5 or 4
yeah,
of us that got to Gold Skull.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
what would happen is, and then that became a bit of a problem because it wasn't like even. So if you had very little experience and you won, then you would get tons and tons of points for that win. But if you
Yes, that's how it was.
were
Yeah.
already a high point total on the rankings, and who knows how they ranked it, but if you had a 1680 rank and you play somebody who just started out and you lost to them, which happened a lot because a lot of these really good players would start a new account just to knock people's points down. They were just jerks like that sometimes.
Oh,
Especially,
yikes.
I know Ron said that those guys from the Rogues were good guys. They would do that all the time. They would make alternate accounts just to knock people. That way, if you lost to them, it would knock your points way down. So it was kind
The
of a
Rose Quadrant guys you're talking about?
yeah,
The
they did
Rose
that all the
Quadrant?
time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But so and if you beat somebody, if you were high points and you beat somebody else who was high points, it'd help you a bit. But as you got higher points, it became harder and harder to go up in points. So I got to
Yeah.
1,850. Everybody thought that when you got to 1,900, you might get like there was a rumor that you would get a diamond skull or something like that, but I
Yeah.
never got there. I've
No one needs that.
The problem is once you got the gold skull, then it was kind of like you didn't want to play anymore because you don't want to lose the gold skull. But after a while, I was like, screw it. And so I played one of those tournaments
Yeah.
where what was it? What were the tournaments? It was a tournament where you join and they would give you 3 packs, I think, and then you just had to all you could do is use
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
cards. What was it called?
So whenever they started a new card set, let's say, so it was Revolution, I think was the last one that came out. I'm not too sure, but so they would have that Friday all the way till Monday. They would have like 3 pack tournament. So you put in, and they would give you 3 packs, and it was blind. So you would use a fleet with those 3 packs and go into the tournament with it. And one was really sweet. I think it was a Chrism Coast where I ended up getting the Raven, which has
Yeah.
3 S's.
Nice.
And oh my God, I ended up winning that. That was one of the greatest times, I ever had because there was like 60 players or 50 players.
Wow.
And I just lucked out to get a helmsman and the Raven on that pack, 3 packs, and I was able just to get any gold and fight and do whatever.
Yeah.
But
I
so that's
had
how it was. Those were great tournaments.
Yeah, I had terrible luck in those tournaments. I couldn't. I seemed to get the worst ships. There was a guy named Jigbim who he had like the best luck when it came to those packs. He was one of the rogues, and I have a feeling that he was one of the better rogues. It was like
I
an
thought it
all.
was Swanee myself.
Yeah, I think it was. But he had just the best luck in those tournaments. Like he would get whatever the packs were, he would get the best ships, and he would win those all the time. I would get like the worst ships.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never been a huge fan of like sealed pack games, mostly because of that luck
Yeah,
factor. Whereas like normally it's more like how good of a
Yeah.
fleet builder you are and how good of a player, but then sometimes if you get like that perfect piece, you can just wipe the floor because it's
Oh
just
yeah,
overpowered. So yeah,
yeah.
it's not my favorite, but
Yeah.
it's fun once in a while, but kind of a
Like I
rarity.
said, yeah, it would give you a high, just to get these 3 packs and see what it is, right? And
Hmm.
then once you open it up and then you see the ship and you're like, whoa. Sometimes you'll say, my gosh, I got 2 S ships moving on S and 1 L, and they all have 5,
Yeah.
5 rank cannons, 5 and then you're like, what the heck, man? But then
Or if
that
you've got
lucky
a
time when you would get that mighty ship, it
if you got a
was
helmsman,
great. Yeah, you had a chance.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Going back to the gold skull stuff, I see from the Hall of Fame site, it says Booty Juice took RedDragon's first gold skull. I don't know if that was that same tournament, but
Yeah, no, it might have been. I think I think it was a he was very happy about that too, by the way. He was quite happy to take my gold skull.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure. Nice. All right, getting back to Jeremiah's last question, do you think the digital version of the game could be relaunched? And what about a Steam implementation?
I don't know much about Steam. I'm not sure like how that would work. I mean, it certainly could. It was a very simple game. You know, the way it was set up. That I mean, it's not the end. I think I noticed that somebody asked a question about the animation or the whatever on it. And there's it wasn't, you know, there was nothing complex about any of the animations. It really literally each ship looked like, if you've seen the videos of them, each ship looked like a little cartoon representation of the constructible ships that you open in your packs. So and you know, the animations, there was nothing all that, of course, back at that time computers weren't like they are today, but it didn't it didn't, you know, require too much. I think today they could easily replicate that game very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually a handful of folks in the community right now working on making like digital representations of the ships and have them look 3D and things like that, just based on
Mm.
scans of unpunched ships from the physical cards. So, yep. And
Yeah.
there's like a tabletop simulator version that's kind of similar to the Vassal module. There's a couple different ways people play virtually nowadays. The Vassal module, which is like a 2D top-down look, um, and I think is really great and easy to play on. And then still kind of in development right now is a tabletop simulator version, which is essentially like a game sold through Steam, and then you can
Mm.
have a module or whatever it's called for Pirates CSG that people have made. So
Oh,
yeah, it's
that would be
definitely
cool.
coming along.
I remember I watched the, you know, getting ready for this, I watched the video of the, you know, because they still on YouTube have the video of the TV commercial for the game, which still strikes me as so funny that they had a TV commercial for this game. But and I remember, and it had some of the voices and everything, and it like really took me back.
Yeah, nice. All right, next one comes from Zone, username Davy Jones at Pirates with Ben. He says, how did the sea monsters look and feel to play as? Did they have realistic animations? And I don't know if they looked as good as the ships, but from the video they looked pretty good.
They look good. They look the same kind, just like the ship, similar to the ship from the board game to the animation on the game. The monsters were the same way. Just one thing, you rarely saw monsters unless you were playing a regular casual game with a big fan or your friend. But you rarely saw any monsters on any on any real games, tournament games especially. But if you were playing with much higher level players, none of them played with the sea monsters,
Yeah,
which is
No,
bad because I love all
yeah,
that part of the game too. Is the sea monsters, the dragon, the crab. I think they were called titans.
yep.
Those were they were cool. I like all that added flavor to the game because the game had so much
mhm.
stuff from the events to the treasures, to the terrain itself. You were able to do so much on that game.
Yeah. The sea monsters. I mean, they weren't. I think they might have moved a little bit, but not really. And the dragon, I think his head might have bobbed a little a little bit, but it was like nothing.
Yeah.
it wasn't impressive. I'll tell you, it was just, and it didn't need to be. It
Yeah.
was more about the tactics and everything. And the problem was, you really had to turn. I did anyway, because when I first started the game, part of the problem I had was that my laptop didn't. It was so old, it didn't play it very well. And so when I upgraded my laptop, suddenly I was winning tournaments and stuff because if you were kind of behind, if you kept, the problem also was if you had an older computer, your computer would crash a lot, and the game was not very stable. So you would start a tournament and all of a sudden immediately crash. And when you're talking about having a timer, then that means that if the other person went first, they could go do their turn, but it took you a couple minutes to get back into the game when you crashed,
Yep.
sometimes as long as 5 minutes, and that's all your time on the chess timer just fading away. So it was kind of a pain. But in terms of that, and so if they did have animations, I don't think I could have played it because it would have been too much. But and so I would turn down all of the uh visual effects
Wow.
and all. I would turn them all the way down because it really didn't matter,
Yeah, that makes sense actually, because then if you turned them down, it might even give you an advantage if there's less latency and lag on your turn when your timer's going. Then you could actually do more stuff in shorter
Yeah,
time.
totally.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
so it's advantageous to not see any advent like animations.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Another question, this one from Commander Cody. My question would be, were there creative changes or rule changes made in order to facilitate it being a video game?
Yeah, I think that the ones that we
Um,
the turn turn based for one thing, because you couldn't have, a tournament go on all day long. If 50 people or 100 people are in a tournament, you can't, that goes on way too long. So they did have to have a timer.
Yep.
But I don't know what, in terms of like some of the changes I felt were just like oversights. I don't
Yeah.
know. Do you know of any, Ron, that were changes they made specifically because it was a video game?
oh no, no, they kind of kept to the same rule from the beginning. And of course, they modify a bit because the islands, as you said,
Right.
they tried to fix Bonaparte problem about 4 or 5 times, to no avail. Yeah, the Chancellor crew was the same thing. They actually one time they fixed it for a day and then it went right back. I don't know why. It
Well,
went
I
right
think
back to what it was. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the Chancellor crew, the problem was because it was such a turn-based game that they had trouble figuring out a way. So if you brought your ship over next to a Chancellor crew, or they come over, or yeah, on your turn, if you took your ship over next to a ship that had a Chancellor crew, or a like the sub that had a Chancellor ability, uh, they had a tough time figuring out how to pause that person's turn and switch
And
it
give it
to
to the other person. You're
give
right.
it to the other person to use that card and have the timer, the chess timer, reflect that. I think it was just too much for the engine that they were using to build the game, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
there you
you'd
go.
almost have to have both players active at once, which kind of makes the timer difficult because
Right.
ideally you can just flip the crew whenever you want. Um, but if you have to turn a turn over just for them to do that, it kind of slows the game down too. So,
Yeah.
all right, awesome. What are your favorite memories of playing Pirates CSG? Whether it's like a
Um,
specific game or
uh,
specific tournament.
but tournament, like I said, that one tournament where it was the blind pack, the 3 blind pack, and I think that was at its peak when Crimson Coast came out. Oh, that was a good tournament, only because I had a really good ship, and I ended up playing about 7 players. So that fun part of winning all 7 games, and then being the one there at the end was cool. And most of the tournaments, I would say, most of the tournaments where you had really high players, and just the fact that you would win 4 games with all these top players on it, and some of them had different fleets, so you had to have a balanced fleet to go against a gold runner. A gold runner fleet would have 2 gold runner ships that would just, and they could beat you in one turn. They would put all the high treasures in their island, and then I think it was the Santa Ana. I think it was a Santa Ana, which was big enough that it would take it just 2 turns to get to an island and then come right back, if especially if you had Ulrico Castro. So if he would roll a 2, if you just happen to roll a 2, you go to that island and you're putting all this extra pluses on it, and then bring it back and you get the added +2. So you had to always look at those kind of fleets too. And if you saw those kind of fleets, of course, on your side of it, you had to put really bad treasure and then hope he would land that bad treasure, like plague, him getting plague. And now that just makes his whole Gold Runner fleet goes down. But just the fact that playing these tournaments, you had to really come with a balanced fleet and be prepared with your +5 crew to add things that would modify your fleet a bit and then change as it goes on. So those are my things with, I would say, tournaments is, in general, playing tournaments was great for the online game.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean, I would say that for me, it was the friendships like Ron and players like Captain Strack and Metal Carnage, and those guys were just, it was just fun hanging out with all those people in the casual room. We'd just be sitting around chatting and laughing. I mean, I just remember laughing constantly about stuff people were doing, or Strack would have some issue with somebody and it would turn into a big, like, it was just funny. But probably my favorite memory was a year into the game, the at during around, I think it was around New Year's, they had a holiday tournament marathon where
Yeah.
where SOE set it up for the couple days around New Year's, where they would just have one tournament after the next, and it went on. I mean, it was every tournament was full, and I learned a ton. That was when I really, in terms of the game, I think I became a man during that tournament, because I learned so much. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna sit here. I didn't really want to do anything for New Year's anyway, so I'm just gonna sit here and play and play and play. And I played, I don't know how many tournaments during those couple of days. Maybe 100. I don't know, and maybe not that many, but it was a lot, whatever it was. You would get prizes, tournament. You would get cards or packs as prizes, and at that time, certain packs were worth more than the base. The base price for each pack, I think, was $5, if I'm not mistaken. But some
Yeah.
packs, like Jade Rebellion or South China Seas, were worth more because they were rarer. You didn't get them as often in random packs, and there were cards in them like the Jade Rebellion. Uh, the
I
helmsmen
believe the
were really hard
helm.
hard to get, and so those you could sell those for like $8. So I think I bought into one tournament, and I don't think I spent $1 the rest of that marathon, because I just kept making. I wound up with more money than I had when I went into it, and I won a few of them. But there were some great players in those. I mean, Metal Carnage, Jester 187. Uh, there were some really really great players at that time. Everybody,
Remember the
what
Paris brothers? The
who?
Paris brothers? The Paris brothers. Tupamaro, I think his
Oh
name
yeah,
was.
yeah.
And
They were from
and
Germany.
Japan.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Tupamaro, yeah, and Bet Holder was I suppose I think it was a woman. Um, but they were all great too. But yeah, Tupamaro was from Germany. But yeah,
Interesting.
we had so much fun. That was probably my best memory, was doing that, because it was just one tournament after the next, and there were, it was so much fun.
Yeah, that is wild how many games you guys must have played, because I feel like the people who played the online game, as many flaws as it may have had and how it was different than tabletop, the online players are some of the most experienced like Pirates CSG players of all time. Because it sounds like
Yeah,
you were involved in like hundreds of games just in the span
yeah,
of a couple
Oh, yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah.
So or
Oh
maybe
yeah,
probably a
in
thousand
this
plus.
yeah, the span of those whatever 2 years or so that we played. Oh yeah, easily. I mean, I the streak that I won on, I think it was like 20 some games where tournaments that I won.
Yep.
Um, that alone would have been, because there's 5 games or 3 to 5 games in each tournament, depending on how big it was. So that's a lot of games.
Yeah. Yeah, it could easily
Yeah.
be 100 games in a tournament, stuff like that, with that many players. Wow.
Yeah.
What was your favorite fleet
Yeah,
that
there
you
was
ever
this.
used?
Say that again.
My favorite faction always
Oh,
been the Spaniards. I just like the Spaniards. They look so greedy, and it's all gold running.
Nice.
But in the online game, I had my favorite fleet. I had the I think it was a Temple.
Yeah,
HMS.
That was
HMS Grand
called.
Temple. Yep. Nice.
Yeah, the HMS Grand Temple, where it allowed pirates. So I ended up putting just Blackheart, Gurney Gallo, a helmsman, and an oarsman, and that was it. That's if I had a roll with Gurney Gallo, that was it. I would just go, and the HMS Temple was running at 3 S's. So it would just go all over the place, and it was the X-Fact, and it was the killer. It was the Zeus killer. That once RedDragon started using the Zeus a lot, I could not use the Zeus because he was using it. So then I just stuck with the HMS Temple, and
Hmm.
to me that was the Zeus killer for me, which was great.
Yeah, my favorite. I mean, I went through different periods. And I mean, I think like in the game, I was known having the dragon, or I was known for using the Zeus. But probably my favorite one was really the Harbinger. I just loved that ship. I loved the look of it. I loved the kind of lore that went with it. And then I would put that one treasure stealer crew on it,
Yeah.
and then use Whirlpool over to the opposing player's island, go steal a bunch of gold from there, and then either ram somebody and destroy somebody's ship, their ship, and I would use the Harbinger skill to get back, or I would just use the Whirlpool to come back, and I won a lot of tournaments with that too. So that would, but in terms of my favorite in just creative uh, set that I used, it was probably be I liked the higher number casual games like 120, because it would allow me to use things like quirky things like the dragon and different things like that. So I don't know. It's hard to say. It just kind of depends. But
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I love playing the higher build total games because they allow you to use like gimmicks and all sorts of
yeah,
crazy stuff that isn't really competitive at the 40
Yeah.
point level. So,
one other ship that I really loved the look of, it was really unusable in tournaments, but I loved Santa's sleigh, and it looked really cool in the game because it had the lights on it and everything, and I wish it had the ability that it had on the card, where what is it, on New Year or Christmas Eve, it's supposed to be able to have unlimited movement or something. I wish they had like made that work, but it didn't. But
yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy piece. Yeah, they
yeah.
probably didn't want it to overrun the tournaments because it was too powerful.
Yeah, well,
Because
they could have
even
made it tournament illegal, but yeah, it would have been cool if just on Christmas Eve, if that ship had just done the things it was supposed to do. But I
yeah,
don't think, was there what was there, Ron, a name or a crew for that? Did they release the crew for Santa Sleigh? I don't remember.
I don't. I think so, like, I never. That's one of the rare cards I don't even have.
Uh,
I think I seen it on eBay a couple of times, but I think wasn't it Santa Claus? Wasn't it Saint
yeah,
yeah,
Nick or something? Was it cool?
yeah. It was
I
yeah,
think
Captain Whitebeard is the name they gave him. Yep.
yeah, and I
that's it.
don't know if they released that, if they ever released that. I don't remember now. But I think Santa Sleigh is the only uh, Christmas card like that they released.
Okay. Nice.
And
Who else?
one of the crews that I think it was So that crew was like that. I think the other rare crew that was cool was the Pirates of the Caribbean set. I think it was the um, which one was it? Where he
Well,
uses
that
all the
wasn't online.
abilities. Yeah, no, that was online though. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, I'm just saying, some of these outrageous crew abilities that was
Yeah.
on the game. I forgot what was that ability, but it was an outrageous ability on it.
Captain Jack Sparrow?
Probably.
Yes, Captain Jack Sparrow. I think the dead one. I think I have it somewhere,
Yeah,
but
there's a couple versions of
where
him that
he
can
borrows.
affect
Yeah.
games pretty dramatically. So I think that would be one of the most challenging parts for the modern community to play the online game is the sets that were never released in the online version.
Mhm.
Because the most meta, like competitive fleets in 40-point standard for tabletop uses at least one, sometimes multiple pieces from the Caribbean set. Like Captain Jack Sparrow has an ability where you trade treasure on an island for a crew on a friendly ship. So then you can
Mm.
fling gold home and then just redock it with a ship that's already at your home island to get gold like instantly on the first turn
Oh
without have to
yeah.
sailing it back. So
Woo!
adjusting to like the different meta online would be pretty fascinating, I think. So
Yeah.
who
Yeah,
was the best?
I don't
Yeah,
think
you go.
Sony had the rights to the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And so even if they had continued, I don't think they would have been able to release that set on the online game because Disney had their own pirate game that they released. So I think that was the word that we got from Sony is that they would not even if they were going to continue, they would not have released that set because Sony there was a rights issue with the movie.
Yeah, that makes sense because Disney probably only licensed it to WizKids for that one set, and then after that, anything else
Yeah.
was kind of off the table. Kind of a complicated licensing thing. Yeah, makes sense. Who do you guys think was the best player of all time for Pirates CSG Online?
Well, I would say it depends on I all around. I don't know, but because it depends on which format you're talking about. If you're
Hmm.
talking about the standard game, 40 or 60, Ron. I think Ron would have to be the best in 40 or 60 standard for my money, and definitely the best in uh, Spanish main only 40 point. Um, I mean, those were, I mean, Ron was good at all phases, but those were the two main that he usually played the most. So I would say he would have to be for those. And then for deathmatch, there was a guy, the Tupamaro would probably be the best in that.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I was the best at any. I was like maybe second best at a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that
To
puts,
to
yeah.
Yeah, to me overall, the best player overall was Red Dragon when it came for everything. Like we had specialists on games, but Red Dragon and Bet Holder, the
Oh yeah.
German player.
Mhm.
Yeah, those two guys with a guy named Jigbin, which I think it was maybe it was Beholder. I don't know. I thought it was another player that we played because when I played his fleet, he kind of looked. I know Red Dragon wasn't that kind because it wasn't his fleet, but he kind of resembled like the way I played and the way Bet Holder played. So it
Mm.
was just weird. But to me, yeah, Bet Holder, Tupamuro, Red Dragon, Metal Carnage was also a killer
Mm.
in the standard, especially 60-point standard game,
Yeah.
where he used the Harbinger. And he had, I think overall, he had the highest score, I think. A couple of times I passed him, but I ended up playing. I played so much that I would go down in points. But
Yeah.
overall, Red
Yeah.
Dragon and Bev Holder, I thought were the best players.
Nice. I'm just coming up with this one looking at the Hall of Fame site. How did the guilds work? I'm seeing under Mahi Swani's name, the growth of the rogues. So how did the guilds work in terms of like alliances or like tournaments? Like if two from the same guild face each other, would one of them kind of forfeit if they thought the other player had a better chance of winning the tournament, or was it
Mm,
more for like collaborating privately for fleets?
it was more about supporting each other. So there weren't a lot. They didn't develop the guild play very much at that point. I think it might have been if the game had survived, maybe they could have developed guild play a little bit more and ways to incorporate guilds. But it was just a support, and so if I started the game with Icthultu in a guild called the Pirate Council, and that was just support. They gave me extras, and they would teach new players how to play. And then I moved to a couple different guilds. I started my own briefly, and then I wound up at the end just joining Ron's. But it was more just, I mean, it never really developed. But if you were in a tournament against a guild mate, now you were expected to play them hard. And I maybe somebody might have forfeit, but I don't think so. I think generally speaking, people tried against their guild mates. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. For the map being really massive, I'm just curious, were there like did you place islands like per the tabletop rules where like player one places the first island, then player two, and things like that? And then if so, the distances would limit how big like the island space could take up. I'm just trying to get a idea of like if you could play like a massive game with like 40 islands, or like multiplayer games where you could use the entire map, rather than just having it be kind of like almost like an out of bounds area where people just sailed if they were trying to time you out and stuff like that, or if that was not an option at
Yeah.
all.
Well, the only tournament games was only 1 against 1,
Yeah.
right? And usually you just have 3 islands. So it's just like the rules. I think it was 3 or 4 islands. I think it's just 3 islands.
Four.
So
It was
there were
four.
times if you were playing 4. Okay, so if you were playing a competitive game, you would end up having the island stretched up like a eye. All right, and it all depends on what fleet you had. Of course, if you had if you were playing if you knew the player you were playing, most times you play so much, so you knew the tendency of most of the players.
Yeah.
So let's say I knew this guy was a gold runner, I would put all the islands together close enough because I would want my killer ship to take it out as fast as possible. If you were playing another guy where even though we both had killer fleets with one gunship, he would make it as an eye because he knew I had a really good gold runner. That was one of the advantage I always had. I always had the best gold runner, even though I had a gunship, but I had the cheapest gunship. My strategy was always to make the other opponent use his gunship first to take out because my ship was faster, my gold runner, and I would force him to go and try to attack that. And then my gunner would go out, and even though he was weaker, it's the one that would be shooting at the strong ship. But it depends. So the islands it depends on who you play and everything. Again, as you played all these games, you knew the tendency and you knew where you had to put the island. And then at the end, it was the luck of what I think of who went second, because the second player was able to put the first player on the island, and then after that, the first player would put the second player on the island, the last island.
Yep.
So sometimes the game came to that also, is who you place where, and where is it. If you were a really good fighter ship, you would want that opponent close to you. If you were a gold runner ship, you would put that opponent as far away as you possibly are to you. That way, you could just get your gold and get back and win the game.
Yep.
Yeah, but that to your question though, Ben, you could in the casual game though, in the casual lobby, you could set up a game so that multiple people. I mean, I think the limit was 6 players, and yeah, you could have tons of islands. And I don't know if you could. It might have. I think you could add as many. Even if you only had 2 players, I think you could add as many islands as you wanted, if I'm not mistaken, and then lay them out. So you could use the larger part of the map if you were in the casual room, not tournament. Tournament was 1-on-1, and there was only four islands. But in the casual game, you could set up it however way you wanted. And like I said before, you could set up your own tournaments. They just wouldn't be paid tournaments where you win a pack at the end of it. But you could, and we did. Like there was a tournament set up by somebody called King of the Seas or something like that. I can't remember now, but and that was just a tournament, a really like couple week long campaign created by a guy named Paladin SG, I think, and that was a lot of fun. There were a lot of different formats. You could one island. He had a map set up online, and I think I don't remember how it went, but part of the tournament you would be doing one format, and then the next part of the tournament you'd be doing another format, and so on and so forth. And all of that was done in the casual room. But I played a lot of games in the casual room with multiple players, 6 players or whatever. We'd have teams. Sometimes it would be every man for himself, and sometimes it'd be deathmatch. Sometimes it would be standard. But that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how customizable that is. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I finally played a couple co-op games with like teams last year. It was definitely pretty crazy dynamic. Because in
Yeah,
the
totally.
tabletop, you gotta to strategize in private, you kind of have to like walk away from the table and then have like a private conversation, like so the other players can't hear what you're saying about how you're gonna collaborate and who's gonna take which island and things like that. So quick question about the islands in tournament. You said 4 islands. Was that 4 wild islands and then 6 total, including the home islands, or was it just 4 total
I
with only 2
I
wild?
thought yeah, I thought it was three. Where so you had three and your opponent had three, and of course one of them would be put in. You would be put in on one of those islands, and at the end it was 4 islands. I could be wrong. Like, it could be
No,
four, and then so
actually,
one you would be put on.
yeah, I don't. I think it was actually it might have been 6 islands, because each player
Yeah,
had 2 islands that they had their
three,
goal
three and
on.
three. Yeah.
3 and 3.
That
Yeah,
makes
so it was
sense.
3 and 3. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So that's more like regular tabletop. Okay. Awesome.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Have you
Yeah, and of course, if you're playing 4 players on a multi-game, everyone had their 3 islands. So now you're
right,
having 4 times 3,
yeah,
and
right.
that's how that was.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. Have you either of you played Pirates CSG since the online version was taken down? It looks like in early 2011.
I
Just
have.
I play with my son.
mm, Yeah, I did a little bit. I don't. I didn't have very many cards, but I played a little bit um, with some friends a couple times. And I played with Icky a couple times, but not really. No, and I haven't played. I haven't played in a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping we can play in LA because eventually I'll be down there again at some point to visit. So
Yeah, that'd be
hopefully.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of players there. It's actually pretty good scene for the game considering how old it is now. So have either of
Yeah.
you guys stayed in contact with any of the other players from the online game?
Have you, Ron?
No, unfortunately not. No, no. Just Matt. We follow each other on Facebook,
Hmm.
and that's it. And just me and Matt. And there's a lot of players I could get in contact with. Like I think it was the Evils. They were from Ohio, I believe they were. But we made good friends. But again, once the game finished, that was it. Unfortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I there was a group that started playing. Actually, this is well before the game ended. There was a group that started playing World of Warcraft, and like in about 2009, probably. And so that was Metal Carnage, Captain Strack, Mongo Evil, and Lady Evil. And there was one other guy,
Yeah.
but I don't remember. And so I joined them after the game ended. I joined them on World of Warcraft and joined their guild on World of Warcraft. But by the time I joined, I don't think I joined it right away after the game ended. So I probably didn't join until like 2010, 2011. I don't remember now exactly, but somewhere in there. And so we played for a while, but eventually they stopped playing that too. And I kept playing World of Warcraft for some years, a few years at least. But the only one that kept playing that was I'd see Mongo once in a while and Lady Evil, and every now and then I'll still get on that game. Like I'll just get a month subscription because there was one there was a mount that I really wanted. It was the Headless Horseman's mount, and so I kept after I stopped playing competitively, I would still log in or get an account, or I mean, pay for the subscription for the month of October because they had a special Halloween thing where you could win that mount, and I kept doing that every October until I finally won it. So I would see Lady Evil on there every now and then, but it's probably been maybe 2 years since I've talked to her. But that's it. Other than Ron here, I haven't talked to anybody else from the game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Mongo Evil actually commented on my site back in 2020 talking about
I
how
saw that.
they were friends with you guys. Yeah. And they mentioned Lady Evil on there, so that's cool to see. So yeah, I'd love to
Yeah, I
talk to
saw that.
somebody. Yeah, I'd love to talk to some of the folks that were players on here consistently, like Tupamaro. Some of the usernames too that I remember from the podcast that you guys did, like DJ Westerdale. I'll try to see if we can find him. And I'm wondering about if Jig Bim. I wonder if that username comes from like Big Jim as like a nickname in real life, and then he switched the letters. I'm kind of wondering.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just
probably.
it's just a funny username. I don't know. I always love
Yeah.
hearing these old usernames from back in the day. It's kind of like almost like inherently nostalgic. So
Oh yeah. No, I mean, the last couple of years I haven't been able to listen to the old podcast that Ron and I did, but there for a while, every couple of years, I'd listen to a couple episodes or whatever, and I'd get very nostalgic because there were, like I said, we had so much fun, and then it was funny because guys were calling in from all over the world to that show. That one guy from Scotland, and then Toop, and he was
Uh,
from
he was
uh,
the Ironclads and heavy accent. That's the guy you're talking about?
yeah, the guy from Scotland.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I remember.
and then there was a guy from Australia, and then people from all over the United States too. So yeah, I had a lot of fond memories of that. So it is kind of nostalgic to hear or even read some of those names, especially on the I look at the Hall of Fame site, and some of those names, uh, Paladin SG. Let's see, Keelhauled, he was the leader of the Rogue Squadron. Course, Captain Strack, Jester 187, Lone Wolf JDR. Those guys were so good too. Lone Wolf was amazing at the game.
yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Baldzilla Bill is actually on Twitter. He was one of the ones that called into the podcast, I remember. So
Yeah.
we've had a little bit of discourse on Twitter over the years about the
Oh,
Pirates
really?
game.
Is his
Yeah,
name Baldzilla Bill on there?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, I'll send it
Oh,
to you separately. Yeah,
wow, that's I know he was part of my guild.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
yeah,
none of those guys in my guild I haven't talked to since back then.
yeah,
Wow, Bazilla Bill.
yep.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Huh.
Wow.
bringing it way back.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So thank you guys for coming on. We conclude each episode by asking a question of the day. I'll let you guys think about yours. If you want to ask one, it's totally optional, of course. So while you think about what you might want to ask the Pirates CSG current community, I'll keep it simple and just ask. I think I've asked this on a video before, but to the community, have you played the Pirates CSG online game? And did you ever interact with any of these awesome folks that were really good at it? So, and I'll turn it over to you guys.
Well, I would just ask if anybody, if people would be interested in playing an online game like this, and if if anybody has any experience putting a game like this together, because I sure would. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, same here. Same here. Definitely. If someone would start a game similar to online Pirates, I would definitely join in. And because again, I had so many fond memories. So of course, the friendship here with Matt, it's been a long time now,
Hmm.
and like to meet the community because the community was cool, and it's a great way of meeting people and playing. A game that we all like. We all have different backgrounds, but we guys who like tabletop games like that usually have similar tastes, which is really good.
Yeah,
That's what I would say about that.
nice. Yeah, I love how it brings people together. I'll definitely send you guys links to the in the Discord where people have talked about recreating some of the scans and turning them into 3D ships because I think you'll find it pretty interesting. So,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right, thanks everybody for listening. This was Pirates CSG podcast number 57 with Captain Ron, and RedDragon. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.